Recording. Welcome to session number 14 of an introduction to biblical prophecy. I'm Dr. John McMath, and I'm joined by my friends in Italy, the Philippines, here in the United States, and ships at sea, no doubt. I never know who's going to be watching on Facebook, YouTube, and other sources. So it's good to see everybody. Let me hang on a second here. As I'm recovering from the latest trip to the Philippines, we're really happy that we could do that. It was wonderful to see people we haven't seen in several years. Children, particularly, who were just little guys 4 or 5 years ago when we last saw them, are now almost grown up. It was rather amazing and quite pleasant. So we really enjoyed seeing the churches, particularly the Manalan Church, to see the completed building. There's still a lot to do, but the building is up and in use. Really quite fun. Okay, today we are going to be looking farther into the covenant structure of the Old Testament in order to understand most of biblical prophecy, with especially the really big patterns. We have to understand the Old Testament covenant structure. Not every biblical covenant is directly related to biblical prophecy, but in general, they form the broad framework of God's plan for the outworking of his purpose in the world. And particularly, we see covenants relating to all of mankind. Back in Genesis, we see covenants specifically relating to Israel. Now, interestingly, there are no covenants that specifically target or predict the church. The new covenant that we'll introduce today has benefits for the church. Matter of fact, all of the covenants have some effect on the church because they affect everyone in the world to some extent. Most of the biblical covenants have to do with Israel. And that's important for our understanding of the place of Israel in the whole scheme of God's plan. When we look at modern news reports, the current truly horrendous war going on in Israel with the Gaza Hamas terrorists and with the Hezbollah terrorists from Lebanon and Iran poking its head into Syria, it's hard not to see the reflections of the Old Testament prophecies, because much of this seems to be coming to pass. So let's get started on that. I'm going to launch right into PowerPoint. Let's see if I can share the screen and do it properly. And in one of these recent times, I did it the wrong way, and it just didn't work out. Okay, what have I got? Okay, there we go. This is these are the major Old Testament covenants. There are some minor ones. Some speak of a Palestinian covenant that may or may not be particularly important. I include it with the Mosaic covenant. But these 6 are the major Old Testament covenants. The basic, the first covenant we call the Edenic covenant, It sits in the Garden of Eden and is the beginning point. The Noahic covenant has to do with Noah. The Abrahamic covenant is foundational to biblical prophecy and lays out the place of Israel in the uh, large scale plan of God. Is what very important. The Abrahamic covenant is, in fact, foundational to our understanding of biblical prophecy. The Davidic covenant has to do specifically with the Messiah. The house of David or the dynasty of David will result in the Messiah. And this is Christ the King. The term Messiah uh, always means the anointed king. It's not merely a religious term, but is rather a political term. The anointed king, the king chosen by God, will be in David's line and will reign forever and ever. That's a very important covenant. We'll look at how that fits into history. The new covenant is introduced in the book of Jeremiah, and very significantly, it also forms a major portion of the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. So the new covenant bridges the Old Testament into the New Testament and predicts a time when all Israel will be saved, as Paul says in Romans 11. This is an interesting structure because it forms a kind of backbone for all of biblical prophecy, and that's what we're going to look at. Now, I know I've done these first two before. I want to uh, come back and put some emphasis on what's going on here, so that we can uh, all be on the same page. Um, Genesis 3 is or 2 3 through 25 is the key passage for what is sometimes called the Edenic covenant, sometimes called the Adamic covenant. It isn't a real covenant. It's kind of a semi-covenant. It's a statement of some basic truths that are true for everyone, everywhere, all the time. They can never not be true. Uh, Sometimes the principles of the Edenic covenant are called natural law. In the structure of natural law, there was only one real law, and it wasn't really a law. It was a prohibition. And we need to talk about that for just a little bit. Uh, that prohibition and the development of natural law defines the relationship of God and man for all of history. None of what is developed in Genesis 2 is optional, and it's not religious truth that's true in church. It's true everywhere all the time. The first great principle of this is that human life is a gift of God. All life is a gift of God, but in particular, human life comes directly from God. So man, in the sense of male and female, is a godlike creature. The other animals also have life from God, but they are well short of God. They operate on instinct, where man has intellect and free will. The garden itself is described as a beautiful place with everything that Adam and Eve needed to live productively and to thrive. Their job in the garden was to work and to keep up the garden. And it would not have been a difficult job because there were no weeds and everything grew very well and it grew all the time. And apparently there was already fruit on the trees. There were full-grown trees. Adam and Eve were full-grown human beings. They had the appearance of age. That again is an important principle for a bunch of other stuff. People ask, well, how can the Earth be merely thousands of years old when it looks like it's billions of years old? Uh, Part of that is the appearance of age. Part of that is simply a misunderstanding of how geology and biology work. But that's scientific stuff. Uh, there is given to man in the garden a Genesis set, a creation set of natural law. And natural law is universally true. Things like gravity and the way that fruit develops from trees to produce a seed that goes in the ground and starts over again, and the way snakes operate, and the way rain and wind and everything else operate. The laws of physics, the laws of mathematics, the laws of biology, all of these things were laid down by God as a reflection of His own character. So natural law, like moral law that we'll look at later when we get to the Ten Commandments, is not arbitrary. Uh, God could not have made a kind of gravity that is random. It couldn't be done. Uh, Gravity is something that we just barely understand. We know how it works. We don't really understand why, and yet gravity is of the essence of God's character. It is a reflection of who God actually is. So we can never violate the laws of gravity. They're always true everywhere, and we can understand them better. Using scientific methods, we can come up with better understandings of gravity, but we're never really changing that, and we can't violate that law. People who jump off bridges usually fall in the water because gravity always does that thing it does. Uh, Other kinds of natural law are also true. Uh, uh, God created man male and female, and men and women are different and designed for one another. It's a very simple thing. God designed the man as male and female for the blessing of mankind, because frankly, life is more interesting when there are males and females. It's just more interesting. Men and women are different, not only physically, but emotionally, psychologically, biologically. There's all kinds of uh, differences that make life more interesting. God designed men and women to be married and to produce children in a system that is very similar across all animal and vegetable life. I mean, the seed in an apple can germinate and become an apple tree and produce more fruit. The propagation of each individual species is dependent uh, on on a kind of beautiful symmetry. Uh, and things work very well when we simply leave natural law alone and learn how to work within it. So yes, there are boy type people and girl type people. They can get married and produce children, and that's a good thing. The modern world wants to try to deny that, and it's uh, undeniable. You cannot meaningfully deny the distinction between male and female. It's not a religious dogma. It's simply true, whether, frankly, whether the perverts like it or not. And the denial of truth is a characteristic of the modern world. We sometimes call this postmodernism, and that's not a good description of it, but that's what the postmodernists like to call themselves. And part of what they're doing is denying the reality or the um, substance of natural law. Uh, but God demonstrates that there are some things that are universally and eternally true. Oh, for instance, if life comes from God, then life is sacred and we ought not kill one another unlawfully. That's universally true. It's always true. This is why human government has the primary function of capital punishment, and by extension, when evil happens at a national level, warfare. There is such a thing as a just war, and that's a part of natural law. Now, in the garden, there was one rule that was provided. This rule was don't eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And of course, we don't know what kind of fruit it was. It's traditional that it was an apple, but the Bible doesn't say that. It just says it was a fruit. There were thousands and thousands of trees in the garden. The garden spread over an indeterminate sized area. The basic principle of this one rule was freedom. The point is not control, but freedom. If God had intended to control man, he would have put up a fence and limited man's interaction to a single tree. You may eat from that tree. Everything else is verboten. Uh, that's called a permissive law. And when a powerful person gives a permission, it's for that one thing and the one thing only. What God is doing in this Genesis law is technically called apodictic law. It's a prohibition, not a permission. God doesn't permit Adam to eat from this tree and that tree and the other tree. He is literally free to eat any tree in the garden. Of all of the trees in the garden, you are free to eat whatever you'd like. They're all good for you. Everything's going to taste good. Just go for it. Go have fun. And the two of you go out and explore the place, explore your relationship, explore the animals, have fun in the garden. But if you eat from this one particular tree, you're going to experience death. And that's a bad thing. You don't really want to do that. This is called apodictic law. It puts a sign on the prohibited act. Um, and it's not a control, but rather an enhancement of freedom. If it is universally true that eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil will produce death, then that would be a bad thing. And it's a good thing for God to warn that they should not eat from that tree. God is not limiting freedom, He's enhancing freedom. That's such an important principle. Uh, when man fails to obey that very simple rule, life becomes more complicated, and most importantly, freedom is limited. Before Adam and Eve fell, they would have lived eternally. They already possessed God's life, and therefore it was an eternal thing. Now there was some kind of conditionality to this because God gives them the potential for death, and yet the life that they possessed was not a temporal thing; it was eternal. And something foundational broke when Adam and Eve sinned. So this is such an important area. It's important for our understanding of all of the rest of biblical theology, because what's happening here is the introduction of sin into the human race limits freedom, because suddenly, instead of an infinite amount of time, we have a limited lifetime. We're going to die. The the potential that man had is severely restricted. So I would say that in the Edenic covenant, the key idea is freedom. God created man for freedom. In the New Testament, we're told that it is for freedom that Christ has set you free. Redemption in Christ is the reversal of the Edenic curse, so that in heaven we will essentially be free again to enjoy God and enjoy one another, and to enjoy the surroundings that God is creating for us, as God creates a new heaven and a new earth with a redeemed human race to live there. He is reversing the Edenic curse. So that Edenic covenant looks at all of history and looks toward the new creation of a new heaven and earth. A lot of key stuff going on here, and important to all of the rest of the Bible, although I would not call it exactly a covenant. The Noahic covenant is also important. The flood really happened. It was a really bad thing, and it ends a period of a biblical history that we typically call the era of conscience, a dispensation of conscience. And Noah uh, uh, comes off the flood, or out of the flood, out of the ark, and receives this rainbow covenant. The unconditional promise of God is that there will be no further disruption of natural processes until the final judgment. There's a final judgment to come. So from Noah to the final judgment, there is this stable universe. God promises a basic continuation and a stability of all of the natural processes. So day and night, the seasons, the movement of the stars in the heavens, the processes of the volcanic eruption and rainfall and erosion and all of the rest will continue at a more or less predictable rate. So that, for example, again, scientists can study the weather and have a good idea of how to predict what the weather will be during the winter or during the summer. Will be able to predict what the weather will be on different parts of the planet. We know that the North and South poles will usually be cold, and that around the equator it will be generally fairly warm and humid. And we know that because of the natural laws that God has set in place. and those natural laws will continue normally. The flood actually resulted from a disruption of natural law that God can do. He doesn't have to, but he can do that. Uh, the yeah, da, 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 da. God provides a blessing to Noah that uh, 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 builds on the Adamic promise. It includes an obligation to be fruitful, to multiply, to fill the earth. And again, uh, the filling of the earth, being fruitful. Let's have lots of children. Let's begin to build things, build cities, build roads, build factories, whatever. Let's farm, let's mine, let's log. This is the ongoing covenant with mankind. Continue to do these things. The obligation to institute capital punishment, the death penalty, is the foundation of human government. This is the obligation of human society to honor the sanctity of life by taking the lives of murderers and, on a large scale, murderous nations. So what's going on in Israel right now is a perfect example of this. The Hamas terrorists literally murdered men, women, and children. They cut the heads off people. They burned people alive in their homes. They are, to this day, uh, after 3 weeks now, they are still firing rockets at population centers in Israel. This is murder on a societal scale, and the counterpart of that is warfare. It is just, in the most basic sense, for Israel to make war on Hamas. It's absolutely just, and it would be wrong for Israel to either ignore the mass murder or to make deals with the murderers. The same thing is going to go for other nations in the region. What's fascinating about the current war in Israel is the extent to which it builds on biblical prophecy. I'm not sure that this present thing is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, but principles of biblical prophecy are being upheld. The nations who hate Israel and want to destroy her are currently in the process of trying to do that. This has happened over and over again throughout history. So this is not necessarily the end time, but it is a foretaste of the end time. One of the most important things that God does at the time of this covenant, the covenant itself, is the promise of stability with a rainbow. The rainbow covenant naturally occurs every time the clouds thin after a rain. When the sun shines through the water droplets, you get the diffraction of light and a rainbow. So it's a perfectly natural thing, and apparently had never happened before. So Noah sees the rainbow, and he's told, every time you see this, you should be reminded of my covenant to keep things the same. And part of that stability that will occur for the natural processes also ought to occur in human society as you build governments that will stabilize society, which will keep crime to a reasonable level and punish murderous nations. And in the process, there will never be another flood. So the Noahic covenant is important. It has some prophetic elements, but again, not a huge amount. The Abrahamic covenant that we see developed in Genesis 12 through 50, what we call the patriarchal narrative, is the first of the great prophetic covenant, and lays out some of the most important stuff that we're going to see in Old Testament prophetic structure. So let's see how it actually works. We start out in Genesis 12, and I'm going to get my Bible because if I try quoting from memory today, I'm almost certainly going to mess something up. I don't want to do that. Abraham is in the line, of course, from Adam through Noah through Shem, and from Shem to Abraham is these several generations. The Bible in chapter 11 gives us approximately 250 years. There actually probably are a few more years than that, and part of that is the difficulty in translating our numbers. It doesn't matter a whole lot, but we put Abraham at about 2166 BC. Okay, so 2,000 years before Christ, here comes Abraham. Now, the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country." Okay, so God said, "Go." And in verse 4, we're going to see that Abram went. So the journey that he made from Ur of the Chaldees through Haran all the way to the promised land is the essence of Abraham's faith. There wasn't any other commandment here. God said go, so Abram went. And when Abram went, he was exercising faith. As this covenant is developed more and more, we're going to see uh, more and more the importance of a personal faith and the nature of that faith in the salvation process. For Abram and his family, to the extent that they exercised faith in God, were saved people. I put air quotes around saved because salvation was somewhat different in the Old Testament, and I want to recognize that. There are some essential similarities, but there are also some differences. As we get farther into the Abrahamic covenant, we're going to see that this faith is a part of the outworking of God's redemption. And I'll show you how the language works out because it turns out to be very, very important. Okay, so as we get into this, uh, uh, God says, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went. Okay, that's that's the essential Abrahamic covenant. There are some elements of this that are keys. So one, Israel is associated with a land. God showed Abraham a land, and there is in the entire sequence from Genesis 12 to 50, and then the rest of the Old Testament, there is an emphasis on a particular patch of land, what we today call the nation of Israel. That patch of land between the Mediterranean and the desert, between the mountains of Lebanon in the north and the desert of Egypt in the south, has always been the promised land. from the time of Abraham. That was the land that God gave to Abraham. The possession of the land, or the right to the land, did not begin when Joshua came into the land or when David became the king. Sometimes people make that mistake. It really begins with the Abrahamic covenant. The land at that time was essentially unoccupied. There were nomadic peoples. There were several cities, including Jerusalem, which was the city of uh, that famous guy that we'll get to later. You can tell I've got jet lag today. But the land is this very, very important thing. The church was never given a land promise. The church was never given a promised land. And the Old Testament is focused on that promised land. The idea that Israel belongs on a specific patch of ground is central to the Old Testament storyline. It wouldn't work if Israel was transplanted into a South Pacific island. Say we made the folks of Micronesia go away and put Israel on a group of islands and taught them how to work boats. It wouldn't be the same story for all kinds of important reasons. That land is central. The second notion is the notion of a nation. I will make you a great nation. A nation is a people group with a hereditary continuation. There's a joining together of these people in marriage and the birth of children, the relationships that happen because of the development of families. So we're going to see the story of a family. So Abram and Sarah, who can't have children, is promised, you're going to have children through you. A big part of the story as we're digging through the Abrahamic story is the inability of Abram and Sarah to have children, and then God's gift of a child, Isaac. And Isaac will be the child of promise. Then Jacob, who will be again the child of promise. 12 sons as the nation begins to expand. And one of those, Judah, the child of promise, who will form the basis of the messianic line that will lead to the kings of Israel, and then ultimately to the Messiah, the King, who will be the Redeemer of not just Israel, but the whole world. So this national blessing is really, really central. The nation will continue to exist as an identifiable nation throughout all of history. Now, those who deny that basic notion are essentially anti-biblical in their eschatology, in their biblical theology, and that includes most Roman Catholics and most Protestants who claim that the church replaces Israel. It doesn't. The church doesn't have a promised land. The church is not a single nation. There's a whole lot of things that the church is that is not Israel. That's important, central to our understanding of biblical theology and, of course, of biblical prophecy. So, a land and a nation, and I will bless you and make your name great. Abraham will always be thought of as the father of the faithful. He is the patriarch of Israel and the father of all who share the faith of Abraham. Very, very big deal. The reciprocal blessing is a blessing for those who love you, or those who support you, those who bless you, and those who curse you. Those who bless you, I will bless. Those who curse you or dishonor you, I will curse. So there are going to be two kinds of people in the world. Jesus speaks of this as sheep and goats. The sheep are those who bless Israel. The goats are those who do not. And we can see some of the goat nations today, those who curse Israel. So Hamas, for example, Iran, Hezbollah, Syria, Egypt, even though there is a very chilly peace between those nations now. Generally, the Muslim nations of the world hate Israel, but we're finding also the non-Christian people groups of the world tend to hate Israel. And it's a funny thing, because who cares about one little nation on the far side of the earth? And yet, this has become the rallying cry for the radical leftist, God-hating Antichrist groups all over the planet, and we see um, demonstrations today in places like Chicago and New York and Los Angeles, but also all over Europe, all obviously all over the Middle East. The United Nations will certainly come up with uh, radical leftist attacks on Israel during the time of this war, because Israel bad, and the Muslims and liberals and left-wing totalitarian tyrants are good. It's That's what we expect, and the promise is, I'm going to bless those who bless you. Today, there's a relatively small number of nations, and within those nations, a smaller number of people who actually support and bless the nation of Israel. I think evangelical Christians ought to go out of their way to voice their support for the modern nation of Israel. Not because the modern nation of Israel is evangelical, they certainly are not, but because God gave them this place and this nation, and those of us who believe the Bible ought to support the nation of Israel. So there is that reciprocal blessing. The most important part of the Abrahamic covenant is the universal blessing. Through you shall all the peoples of the earth be blessed. That's a good thing. That's a really good thing, because that universal blessing comes through the person of Christ himself. It is 2,000 years away for Abraham, and yet Abraham believed what God said. The Messiah will come, and Abraham knew he could trust the completed work of God. It wasn't completed yet in his time, but it would be. And on that basis, Abraham received his salvation. We look back to the completed work of Christ. That universal blessing applies to everyone with the same faith as Abraham. And thus it is central to biblical prophecy. As the Old Testament looks forward to the Messiah, the church looks back to the work of the Messiah and forward to the second coming of the Messiah. And all of that forms a structure of God's plan for the ages, which the prophets point to over and over again. Okay, the rest of Genesis is a is an outworking and a development of the Abrahamic covenant. So there is a continuing emphasis on the land. This is a piece of land that actually happens to be up in the Golan Heights, which is part of the Promised Land. The yellow and red sign you see on the left tells us that we're entering a minefield. So that was put in place by the Syrians many years ago, and still has not been cleared at the time that I took this picture. So the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift up your eyes, look from the place where you are, north, south, east, and west. For all the land which you see, I will give it to you and to your descendants forever. That's basic, and we are going to see that covenant come up over and over and over again. The land continues to be important. Israel could not be moved to Siberia. It wouldn't work. Israel belongs on the promised land. In chapter 15, we see an interesting thing. Kings had a tendency to cut a covenant. Okay, the word covenant means to cut, and here we see that actually happening. God appears to Abram and makes a promise of a very great nation. Abram says, "Well, how can I know this?" And God says, "I'm going to make a covenant with you right now." And he put Abraham to sleep. Well, he had Abraham cut up some animals on two sides of a path, and then put Abraham to sleep. And God, in the form of a smoking fire, walked through these two parts of the covenant. It was a promise. If I ever break this covenant with you, let me become like these dead animals. This is God promising his own life as the earnest of the promise of a nation. And most importantly, 15:6 is justification language. So Abram believed God. Okay, the word believe there is emunah. It's the New Testament word for faith. Abram believed God, and it was accounted to him. New Testament often translates reckoned. And this is the language of justification, and it was accounted to him as righteousness. Righteousness, again, very important New Testament word. When we get to the book of Romans and look at the language of justification, faith and accounting and righteousness are all right in the middle of it. Abraham's faith and his salvation were the same as ours, with some significant dispensational differences, but with the same essence. Okay, in chapter 17, we get the everlasting covenant language. You're going to be the father of a multitude of nations, which is quite true. Israel will be only one of the Abrahamic nations, which is interesting. Again, in the modern world, we see uh, uh, an American president, Donald Trump, initiating a thing called the Abrahamic peace process. Let's get the Abrahamic nations to make peace with one another. And of course, that would be a really good thing. And again, the land of Israel, this is the Western Wall in Israel, the land of Israel is the place of the blessing. The confirmation to Isaac, when we see Isaac introduced to the land, and the reiteration of the covenant, is again this emphasis on land. When Jacob has his dream with the ladder, God appears to him and confirms his place in the covenant line, and the emphasis again is on the land. And it's a rocky and sometimes barren land, but it is the land that Israel is promised. When we come to the end of Genesis, we see Joseph dead in Egypt, uh, and yet God making the promise to Joseph, after you're dead, you will stay here for 430 years, and your bones will be carried up to Israel, to the promised land, and buried in the right place. And this is um, Joseph's tomb is actually quite close to this place. This is Jacob's well. There's an Orthodox church built over the top of it, but wells don't move. It's in the right place. And Joseph's tomb is about 50 yards from this place. And significantly, the Palestinians have destroyed Joseph's tomb. I was there in 1980, 84, 85, whenever I was there. And the tomb was still intact. We were able to go there. There were Israeli soldiers guarding it, but the Palestinians came, killed some soldiers, and ransacked the tomb and destroyed the place. And it's still sometimes visited, but only under an armed guard. The promise is this land is your land, and this will never change. So the nation of Israel is forever. The land is a forever promise. The blessing to Abraham in particular, and to the nation of Israel specifically, and then to the entire world through Israel in the Messiah, is the Abrahamic covenant. And for biblical prophecy, the two really, really important elements are the land and the nation. We would expect that the biblical prophets will give us some hints as to what will happen to the land and what will happen to the nation as Messiah is preparing for a second coming. We would expect that. And in fact, that's exactly what we find. Next week, we'll pick up where we're leaving off now. And next week, we'll go on to the Mosaic covenant. We'll start looking at Torah and how all of that works. But for now, I'm going to see if I can stop the share. Yeah, there it is. Okay, guys, thank you for coming. I'm looking here, and we've got the full complement. You're all so faithful. This is humbling for me. That old jet-lagged Bible teacher manages to go on the computer and here's a bunch of friends, and you just keep coming back. Thank you. I appreciate that very much, more than I can say actually. So we're going to take off now. It's been good. I appreciate your presence here very much. We continue to pray for the church in Italy and in the Philippines. I believe God is doing a good thing with you all. And Donna and I are privileged to be a small part of that. God bless. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Love you
Dr.
guys.
John. Ciao a tutti.
Ciao a
resto.
tutti. Yada.
Thank
Ciao,
you.
ciao. Bye-bye. Yeah.